and welcome to this podcast from Haydock Finance, where we share expert views and insight into the world of asset finance. In this episode, we'll be focusing on prestige vehicle finance and exploring how Haydock has become a fast-growing force within this market. I'm delighted to say that we're joined by Scott Riley. And Scott, you've been with Haydock Finance now since the beginning of 2025.
That's right, yeah.
Tell me a bit about your role as head of prestige vehicles.
I sort of joined at the start of the year with the main focus being on how we can grow the prestige vehicle market within Haydock Finance and opening up our policy to allow our broker network to really have something they can offer to their customers. I've come from a background of prestige vehicles with other lenders, and it's been a case that bringing some of that expertise on board and some education pieces, we've really managed to open up what we offer and seen some great results this year off the back of it.
And there's been a significant increase, hasn't there, in demand for prestige vehicle finance. I mean, what would you say is driving that momentum? What sort of scale are we talking about?
It just continues to grow sort of year on year. You sort of think, have we reached the top of where this is going? And then it just continues again. More cars add in each year in terms of where you see some real sort of growth in their value. And I think it's one of those sort of areas where there's a number of reasons that people like to sort of put that into their portfolio. And that could be the costs that are involved. So whereas sometimes when you buy property, there's sort of, there's costs involved in the actual purchasing, and when you sell, there's more costs involved. The car market doesn't do that. So as an asset, it's very attractive to people. And where there has been some real significant growth on certain models, it's that trying to find the next one. And I think that little bit of the interest and the passion that's behind, can I find the car that's going to keep going up, and then add into their portfolio. So it just continues to grow. It's quite a fluid market in what vehicles do.
And in terms of a scene setter and context, really, how would you describe Haydock Finance's role within the space?
It's one that's become a really big part of what we do as a company, and it's become a really important offering to the broker network that we do. And I think a lot of that is behind the service that we offer. We've really tried to make sure that we have prestige vehicle focused staff members working across all of our departments that understand the market. And that's allowed us to really sort of put something out there that is relevant. And to see the growth that we've had and the interaction that we've had with brokers this year and how they've really sort of embraced the offering that we've got has been really exciting to see. And I think it's only going to just continue to grow next year as we look to add more into what's out there for them.
Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into the prestige car market now then. You've given us a great overview, and we understand that there is this rise in demand. Be really interested to know a little bit more about that. Can you explain what's behind that growth?
I think for us, we've seen amazing growth this year. So we're 211% up from 2024. And I think there's been a number of factors. There's definitely the changes in policy that we've managed to put in place. So when I've come on board, we looked at what the offering was to see how much did we do that everybody else did, and what could we actually look to add that maybe gave our brokers something to work with their customers that they didn't get from all the other funders. So we looked to try and add some sort of modern classics into our offering, and we looked to add the way that we actually work with our valuing team and the underwriting team to proper expertise into that whole sort of section. I think some of the growth has come from our own appetite. So whereas before Haydock Finance, as big as we are within the asset finance market, the prestige vehicle division was never a big focus on what we did. And then when we decided to obviously bring me on board and look to grow that, I think where we've added that in. So some of it's for our own appetite. So the market's always been strong. We've just actually wanted to get a bigger piece of it. But actually, the broker network and the way that they've embraced what we've offered has made a massive difference. And a lot of that has really come from the relationship piece. So every department that we have, we make sure are broker facing. So there's nothing that we do, whether it's our underwriters or our valuation team, the sales support teams that we have in place, everybody is happy to pick a phone up, have a conversation with the brokers and really work on each deal so we understand it properly, make sure it's being positioned in the right way, and understanding the customer behind it all, because no matter which way you sort of look to sort of work a deal, the broker's our customer, the customer is obviously the broker's customer, but we all play a part in making sure the end result is there, and the more we understand that person, it makes a massive difference.
That's absolutely great to hear, and congratulations on that growth as well.
Thank you.
In terms of gaining a bit more insight into perhaps the attitudes and activities of the high net worth individuals, have you got any thoughts perhaps on why they are thinking about seeking finance rather than buying outright?
This was something that always, for me, when I first came into this world of prestige vehicles, I always used to think, well, if they've got lots of money, why do they need finance? What you learn really quickly is that the high net worth individuals that we deal with, having access to their money and the opportunities that they usually work with within their day-to-day lives and the businesses that they run and things, is much more important to them than having their money tied up in assets. What they look to do is to try and buy the right vehicle. So when they're looking, especially within the investment sector of what we do, they will look and hope that obviously those vehicles are going to appreciate in value. So sometimes actually what it's costing them to fund that purchase, they get back within the appreciation within the vehicle across the term anyway. Doesn't always go that way. You can never guarantee a vehicle is going to go upwards. They quite often, it can be a static market, and you will pick the odd vehicle that sometimes, trends change and they can go down. But overall, having access to the money and the hope that the vehicle is going to perform the way that they think when they're buying it far outweighs the benefits of paying cash to them.
That's interesting what you were talking about trends, which I suppose brings me on to thinking, have you seen any changes in attitudes from clients and customers towards that sort of luxury market, really?
I think the main attitude and the things that you see is how important the broker relationship is with customers. So all of these deals are different, and the way that you need to be able to structure them, understand the vehicles that are behind them and how commercially minded you can be on them because of what you think that vehicle may do, all play a really big role in the final decision that you get to. So having that bespoke service, proper customer relationship, and that's across all the levels of the deal, is where you will see the biggest change. And I think that's something you don't necessarily get from your standard sort of loans and banks and things. They don't necessarily understand that market. Quite often we can be educated by the brokers because they're really passionate. They've chosen to work in this space. There's many areas they can work in within the asset finance world. Prestige vehicles where they've been drawn to, quite often that's because they have a passion for them. So they know a lot about the vehicles and the values and the trends. And having those conversations between our underwriters and them and the customers as well, because obviously they know a lot about the vehicles and the supplying dealers, all makes a difference. So that definitely is where I think that, in terms of where they see the need for that broker relationship and a funder relationship that specialises in this area, makes all the difference.
So just how important is the broker network in this area?
For us, it's key. We're a broker-led company, so the relationships we have with them and the relationships they have with their customers is what pushes all of the business within our prestige vehicle offering. They obviously really understand the market. It's what they specialise in. They have a shared passion with their customers. So the customers, when they're usually coming and talking about their vehicles, they like nothing more than talking about the vehicle they want to buy because they're passionate about it. And the broker understands it. They will ask about the models and the makes and what history it's got, and they just help indulge in that whole conversation. And then from what we add to that is the experts that we work with. So the level of expertise we've got PV or prestige vehicle dedicated underwriters who really understand what type of customer usually works in this space. But we also work with independent valuers who have great expertise in this market. And that really helps us shape how a deal should look, and that's working with our own asset management team that we have internally. And a bit like myself, obviously we've spent a lot of time in this market, so I also have an opinion, and I quite often share it. It's one of those things that collaboratively all together, it makes a massive difference. But without the broker network, that's our starting point and our end point, really. So it's massively important to us.
And really your passion for it does shine through as well. It's got obviously great insight that you've got, and in terms of perhaps the policy as well that has been developed. You were talking about, the past 12 months as well, particularly. How would you say that Haydock Finance's policy now in this field is really giving something extra that others are not?
I think the changes we've had are really big, to come on board. And the process that you go through for everybody to understand when you're trying to add something to a policy, and that's the risk departments that are involved, because obviously they're going to be looking at different types of deals that they may not have looked at before, and understanding why the need to do that is there. What was really beneficial for me is coming from a background of prestige vehicle and doing large deals, and working in a different piece of the space of the market that we didn't really do at Haydock. It allowed me to really share some proper sort of case studies, what the hurdles we'd had along the way and things like that, to be able to get some peace of mind really with making decisions that we did. So the things that we've added in, I'd like to think my background before moving into finance was actually working on the dealer side. So I've done both roles within actually selling prestige vehicles and then helping finance them. And the goal was to create a policy that allowed anyone within the process of it, whether it was the broker or even the dealer that's selling the vehicle, to have something they thought, I could use that and shape that into something that would work for a customer. So it's not always about will we do the highest deal or will we do the lowest rate and all those things. It's more about how flexible can the policy be for it to work with the different levels of customers that people will see. And what I've found really refreshing is Haydock Finance we do asset finance. That's it. And I've worked for funders before where the asset finance has been a very small part of a much bigger operation. So it's never really the key focus, whereas at Haydock, it's all we do. So for us, being able to have the teams in place and the autonomy to actually react to the market, see what's popular out there. And across this year, I've probably had 5 or 6 conversations where we've added an extra bit in, and we've added an extra bit in because the need's there and the brokers are saying, do you think this is something you could accommodate for us? So we're very reactive in that way, and that's made a big difference as well, because I think when a broker feels that you're listening to where their needs are and actually then delivering something they can use, it makes a massive difference, and again adds to the relationship.
And with the level of expertise that you've got at Haydock Finance, you're sharing that then sometimes with the brokers as well.
Yeah, it's the relationship piece again. So whether it's me, the team that I work with, we are we're very against it being a push an email out and send out information. We go and visit our brokers. We'll sit with their teams. We'll present the policy changes that we do. Ask for feedback from them as to how they think that will work with their customers. And talk about why that's where we've positioned ourselves. So we try and really add value to what they do and what they offer, and be the person who picks the phone up when there is a question, when there is something we can challenge. And actually, we challenge ourselves internally. So when it comes to things that may not be in policy, but is there a customer behind it that's really strong and we can consider doing an exception outside of our policy because we like the asset and we like the customer and the way the deal's structured, we need to be able to do that as well. And again, that only really comes from a broker feeling they can pick a phone up and saying, can I talk this deal through with you? How do you think it looks? And then that's how we try and work. So yeah, relationship is key.
So I'm really picking up from what you were talking about the flexibility that's involved, also collaboration, and of course expertise. So it'd be great if you could bring that all to life and perhaps, I don't know, an example of something that's particularly memorable for you that you've worked on, a deal perhaps that would tie all these things together.
All deals are different. So yeah, you really do get to see a great sort of variance in the vehicles that you're seeing. But for me, it's when you have a customer that has a large collection. Quite often they will look to use that collection to maybe release some equity against it, and then they'll use that money in another investment that they have. But you're working with 2, 3, 4, 5 different vehicles, and that's where the challenge begins, because you may have a vehicle that's only a year old and it's very easy to value, but there may be a vehicle in there that's sort of 20, 30, 40 years old, and you have to go out and visit it and check the condition and the provenance of its history to make sure that you're valuing it correctly. And all of that, you get real great sort of feedback from the customer. And again, their passion comes through in why those cars are in their collection. You have to then try and move that on to an underwriter whose role really is to try and take the passion out of it and look at the numbers and the figures and actually sort of how that all comes together is really great. And you get to really see some interesting things with those people, because quite often the cars will be in different storage facilities. So you're traveling up and down the country, seeing where they are and how they're looked after. And you start to grow relationships with external companies based on that. And they know who you are and why you're coming to see them and make them all available to you. So when something like that's presented to you and you think, I can get my teeth into this one, they're my favourite types of deals. And quite often for the broker as well. I think for them, the more complex it becomes, I think the more relevant they feel in why that broker, expertise is really, really important, and why they have such a strong role to play within the business that exists within this market.
So challenging and complex, but obviously an opportunity to showcase all the expertise and skills at the same time, and particularly that collaboration you were talking about. Yeah,
definitely. And I think that's where a customer sees the real relevance in using a specialist funder when it comes to their collection and what they want to achieve with it. And for me, it's definitely the passionate bit for me comes out there, because there's vehicles that you're sometimes lucky enough and you see one that was on a poster on your wall when you were younger, and you think, I want to take it home, and you can't, but at least you get to touch it for a little while. And it's it's one of those ones that, they often pop up and you think, this is one I definitely want to do the visit on that one and go and see it.
Great stuff. So Scott, in terms of the how and the what happens now, that delivery piece, how do you actually maintain that quality and level of service when you're seeing demand and volumes now increasing?
That is always a challenge, but it's one that I think we really sort of face head on. It's, for us, we really try and have a culture of right first time. So we have many departments that will look and touch a deal that comes into us, and whether that's when it first arrives and our proposals team pick it up from the broker and load it into our systems, and then they may move it on to the underwriting teams or the valuation teams, depending on what we need. We have a right first time approach. So they won't move that on until they know they've done everything they need to do. If there's anything missing, they'll pick a phone up to the broker and say, actually, we need this to make sure it goes through without it being pushed back to you. And it gets passed on so the next person can actually pick that deal up, work on it efficiently, feed back any information into myself and the team that we need to. And that sort of knowing that everybody actually has the same care and attention as you go through makes a massive difference, because you don't want to be the person who lets the chain down. So you work it, you make sure you do everything you need to do, and you pass it on to the next person. But where we have different teams that look after different aspects, we're never reliant on one person to pick a deal up, process it, go back for any answers, then get it through to a payout situation. There'll be someone else who then picks it up and does that. So you're allowed to really focus on the bit that you need to deliver. That means that we have a consistent approach. And as things change, as new things come in terms of aids that help you do things faster. What we look to do is to make sure that it's never in replacement of that relationship and person. It's actually to assist them to just do a quicker, more efficient job. And for us, like I say, the key element of everything is relationship.
So would you be able to summarise perhaps and to just draw together a few of those key themes about what makes your underwriting team different to others? Because you've given us a great overview and some fantastic practical, I think, content there. So we really understand how efficient you are. But what would you say just in summary to that?
I think one of the nicest things for me when I joined was actually someone said to me within the first week, it will take you a while to understand what a Haydock deal looks like. And that to me sort of, I just thought, well, a deal was a deal, but it really isn't. We're such a commercially minded company. And that's really challenging, for our underwriters to sort of look at a deal and their mentality is always, how do I turn this into a yes? And rather than let's look for a no. And as working in the sales sort of side of a business, that is actually music to your ears, because that they will do everything they can to turn it into something that may work for a customer. It might not always be as it's been presented to us. We may have to look and say, actually, if we could just change this or that, it becomes something that we can, start to get on board with. But they will pick a phone up, they will have a conversation, they'll try and be commercially minded, they'll use all of the information available to them on what the vehicle may do and what our valuers think it may do. And it's important they also understand the relationship that the broker may have with that customer. Is it the first deal they're doing with them, or is it maybe the third, fourth, fifth car they've done? And actually they've been serviced really well over the last 10 years, and we can see that history there and start to get a pattern. So they'll look for all of those points to see where are the strengths within what's been presented to us. But yeah, for me, the commercially minded aspect is just outstanding.
I really love that. And I'm going to just use last few minutes that we've got of the podcast to give you a few quick fire questions, if that's okay, Scott. So these are just like little brief ones that come straight into your mind. And I guess to start off with, what would you say is the biggest myth in the prestige vehicle finance market?
Biggest myth is that all vehicles go up in value. They don't. It'd be lovely if they did it. My job would be very, very easy. So you still have to sort of care and attention in what's being presented to you and the way that you structure it, and making sure that a customer ends an agreement in the same position they sort of started it with. Really, you've got a responsibility to make sure that you view everything and use the information to hand. So I'd love to say that just buy one and it always goes up. Not always the case, but there are some that's been great success stories.
That's a great one. In terms of brokers, what is one thing that they should be doing before bringing a deal to you?
Tell us the story of the customer. We are known to be what some in the broker network would call a storybook lender. And what that means is where we try to have a commercial view on everything. The more we understand, the more we can, the braver we can be, really. And that's what it comes down to. So, the more you know, the more you can share. If you've got the information, put it in the proposal and tell us, and we'll try and mould that into something. Sometimes, you get brokers, very efficient, and they'll give you exactly the details of the vehicle, and they'll tell you what the price is, and they'll tell you what they think the value is going to be, and that's great. Obviously, that they are very important factors of what we receive. But the underwriter then sometimes looks at that and thinks, I just don't understand the customer. Is it in keeping with what they do? Is it something that they're starting to dip their toe into? And actually, the story makes a difference. So for the brokers out there, we always say, tell us the story, and let's see what we can do with it.
Another great one. Is there a car that you have done a deal with that you think, I'd really love that car?
For me, there's many cars. I grew up in that era of like when you dreamt of your first car. So that was sort of the time of the 80s hot hatch. So, there was the Peugeot 205 GTIs and things like that were sort of dream cars for me. But the ultimate car that I've done a deal on for me is a 1993 Porsche 911 Turbo 964, which, for want of a better word, is the bad boys Porsche. So the film Bad Boys, the car they drove in black, that was the dream car. And I did one of those, and that was the saddest I've ever been, walking away from a vehicle knowing that it wasn't mine. But yeah, great that I got to sort of be involved in one.
And you made someone else's dream come true
Yes,
in the process,
yes,
absolutely.
they
And
did.
one final one then, any predictions for 2026?
It continues to change. Everything changes. One of the things that you do notice is that as the buyers change, and obviously they grow older, some of the people that are now entering the market, the cars that they dreamed of having that were on their posters, for them are very different to maybe the buyers of the last 10, 20 years. So whereas some dreamed of having the James Bond Aston Martin DB5, there's others now who are dreaming of the Testarossas and things that and these 80s cars and early 90s cars that continue to be so popular. So I think, it's now looking at what the next buyer is looking for, and is there that next level of car that will come in and surprise us and think, oh wow, look what that's done this year. So it's exciting to see and see what sort of what the market does, and there'll always be a car that surprises you along the way, and they're the ones that you think, oh, if I only had bought one of those. But it's that's the exciting part of it.
Absolutely. And it's been fascinating talking to you as part of this conversation, Scott. I've taken certainly a lot about the trust, the relationship, the collaboration, the expertise that you're bringing there at Haydock Finance into the prestige vehicle finance market. So congratulations on everything you're achieving so far. And I know you've got big ambitions going forward as well. What would your perhaps key thought just be at this stage, perhaps reflecting, but also looking forward, just in a final thought for people, really?
Next year is going to be exciting. That is the main thing for us. It's how do we grow? How do we move it forward? This year's been a real year of change for Haydock Finance and how we have embraced the prestige vehicle market. And when you're a year on, you've got a year's worth of information you can use. So we can now look back and see what those deals have done, and the difference it's made, to us internally, and the success that we've had. And it allows you to be brave and think, right, what's next? So yeah, for us, it's we want to get out, see all of our brokers nice and early in the year, talk about the plans that we have. We've got new valuation tools that are going to be introduced, in January, which they'll be able to use. And I know that's something that has been something that we've worked really hard on being able to deliver. And I think that will make a big difference again in moving forward. So I'm hoping it'll be this time at the end of next year that we think, right, okay, then what does 2027 bring? And move forward again. But yeah, exciting times ahead.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much. And we hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to check out our other podcast as well, brought to you by Haydock Finance. And we'll be back with our next one soon.